ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and those beyond the binary. Welcome to another lovely June Monday, and it is, in fact, bedtime. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Colin, and it's bedtime, brother. This is Brother Bedtime, where we read stories for big and little kids. I would consider myself a decidedly big kid, but a kid nonetheless. Don't let the beard fool you. Welcome. Hello. It's good to have you. How are you? How was your weekend? Feel free to pipe in with the chat with any exciting business that you got up to. I myself had a rather busy weekend. On Friday, we went to the Black Lives Matter protest down at the legislature grounds, which was an historic moment. I think there was something around the 15,000 people mark, which is unprecedented as far as rallies in Edmonton go. And everything that I've seen coming out of the news and the fallout of that has been really positive. City Council sounds like it's going to talk about some positive action regarding a lot of these issues. So fingers crossed that all this noise people are making amounts to some real positive change. So Saturday, I didn't get up to too much. I feel like there was something. Maybe I went grocery shopping. I think it was Saturday that I went grocery shopping. And then on Sunday, just yesterday, I went on a hashtag long walk with my good man Tim. For those of you that are familiar with the geography of Edmonton, we started off in the Garneau area and noodled our way down to the old Keeler Road Vista, aka the end of the world, where the highway started to fall into the river, and they blocked it up for a long time, and now they've sort of realized that it's just too beautiful a place to keep squirreled away from folks, and they've set up sort of a vista there. From there we walked on down through the river valley to Fort Edmonton Park and around behind that, and all the way up into Wolf Willow on the west end, and then sort of noodled our way back through the suburbs and the castles and various bits of forest till we made our way down to Horlac through Buena Vista Hill and across the bridge there, and then up Grote and safe and sound back to good old White Avenue. It was quite the journey, and I spent most of today whining about how sore my muscles are. I've got a few really banging blisters too, but I will spare you the trouble of inspecting them. Lance says they replanted the sunflowers. They weren't getting much sunlight. Incredible. I understand that sunflowers enjoy the sun. I don't know that for sure, but something about the name gives me a hunch that that might be the case. Our beans are, pardon my French, kicking rump. They're kicking rump. They're almost all up now, and most of them have split. So I'm going to be taking a sojourn to pick up a trellis in the next day or two here, so that our garden can continue to flourish. And I think that's about it for news on my end. Tonight's beverage will be chocolate milk. This little jug has done me good. I've also been enjoying a lot of pickle juice today. Now, that sounds disgusting, and it probably is, but I have sort of reawakened my love of pickle juice. Yeah, I don't know why. It feels good. It feels good. It feels really good. This, however, is not pickle juice. This is baby calf growth formula flavored with cocoa. And it also feels really good. Last week on the show, we wrapped up with Prince Caspian. His adventures have come to a conclusion for the time being. And we saw a rather somber departure from the land of Narnia with the Pevensies, as it was disclosed that Peter and Susan, the eldest of the Pevensey children, would never be returning to Narnia again. Lucy and Edmund, though, they still had a shot at it from the sounds of it. And Aslan opened a door in the air and sent the Telmarines back to their tropical paradise for them to begin anew, undiscovered and undisturbed by the vagaries of humanity. And the rest of the Pevensey children were teleported back to the train station to get on with some good old-fashioned schooling. We got another pickle juice fan in the crowd. What up, Lance? Yeah, pouring out for my Polsky Agorkies out there. Spare me your butter pickles. please. Today's book is The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the fifth in the series. The cover features an image of the ship looking rather like a Viking longship, and with a glorious purple sail. On the behind that, you can sort of see a rather technicolor sunset, as well as a mysterious pillar of darkness. And it's hard to discern from the lack of focus that the camera is providing right now. But there's also a slew of denizens of the deep under the water. Giant seahorses, merfolk, and the like. So I guess that is what we can expect. Some variety of nautical adventure on a boat presumably named the Dawn Treader. Here on the inside cover, we can see, as C.S. Lewis has been wont to include in his books, a map of the particular area of Narnia that we'll be spending our time in. It looks like the ship will be departing from Narnia, making its way through the Bight of Calormen, and from there out further into the great Eastern Ocean. I haven't spent too much time on boats myself. I always sort of romanticize the notion of becoming a longshoreman or a crew hand on a tanker or something between here and Hong Kong, and just never got around to realizing that particular dream. But who knows? Maybe this will reawaken my wanderlust and desire for the sea, and after I finish it, will find me on a junk bound for Beijing. But before that, the story. So I hope you're all sitting comfortably. I hope you've got your tea or your beverages or your snacks or your kitty cats and your puppy dogs and your blankets and your slippers and your heating pad. I hope your creature comforts abound. Please enjoy. Chapter 1. The Picture in the Bedroom. There was a boy called Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. His parents called him Eustace Clarence, and his masters called him Scrubb. I can't tell you how his friends spoke to him, for he had none. He didn't call his father and mother father and mother, but Harold and Alberta. They were very up-to-date and advanced people. They were vegetarians, non-smokers, and teetotalers, and wore a special kind of underclothes. Are they Mormons? Is that what that means? What does that mean? In their house, there was very little furniture, and very few clothes on beds, and the windows were always open. It sounds quite nice, really. Eustace Clarence liked animals, especially beetles, if they were dead and pinned on a card. Oh, he's one of those boys. He liked books if they were books of information, and had pictures of grain elevators or of fat foreign children doing exercises in model schools. Eustace Clarence disliked his cousins, the four Pevensies, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. But he was quite glad when he heard that Edmund and Lucy were coming to stay. For deep down inside him, he liked bossing and bullying. And, though he was a puny little person who couldn't have stood up even to Lucy, let alone Edmund, in a fight, he knew that there are dozens of ways to give people a bad time if you are in your own home and they are only visitors. This Eustace kid sounds like a real make-work project for one such as Aslan. Edmund and Lucy did not at all want to come to stay with Uncle Harold and Aunt Alberta, but it really couldn't be helped. Father had got a job lecturing in America for 16 weeks that summer, and Mother was to go with him because she hadn't had a real holiday for 10 years. Peter was working very hard for an exam, and he was to spend the holidays being coached by old Professor Kirke, in whose house those four children had had wonderful adventures long ago in the war years. If he had still been in that house, he would have had them all to stay, but he had somehow become poor since the old days, and he was living in a small cottage with only one bedroom to spare. It would have cost too much money to take the other three all to America, and Susan had gone. Grown-ups thought her the pretty one of the family, and she was no good at schoolwork, though otherwise very old for her age, and Mother said she would get far more out of a trip to America than the youngsters. Edmund and Lucy tried not to grudge Susan her luck, but it was dreadful having to spend the summer holidays at their aunt's. "But it's far worse for me," said Edmund, "because you'll at least have a room of your own, and I shall have to share a bedroom with that record stinker, Eustace." Here we can see the record stinker showing off presumably one of his little bits of entomology collection, and a shadow looking rather ghastly behind him, presumably meant to communicate just how foul, just how recordly this little stinker is. The story begins on an afternoon when Edmund and Lucy were stealing a few precious minutes alone together. And of course, they were talking about Narnia, which was the name of their own private and secret country. Most of us, I suppose, have a secret country, but for most of us it is only an imaginary country. Edmund and Lucy were luckier than other people in that respect. Their secret country was real. They had already visited it twice, not in a game or a dream, but in reality. They had got there, of course, by magic, which is the only way of getting to Narnia. And a promise, or very nearly a promise, had been made them in Narnia itself that they would someday get back. You may imagine that they talked about it a good deal when they got the chance. They were in Lucy's room, sitting on the edge of her bed and looking at a picture on the opposite wall. It was the only picture in the house that they liked. Aunt Alberta didn't like it at all. That was why it was put away in a little back room upstairs, but she couldn't get rid of it because it had been a wedding present from someone she did not want to offend. It was a picture of a ship sailing straight toward you. Her prow was gilded and shaped like the head of a dragon with wide open mouth. She had only one mast and one large square sail, which was purple, a rich purple. The sides of the ship, which you could see of them, where the gilded wings of the dragon ended, were green. She had just run up to the top of one glorious blue wave, and the nearer slope of that wave came down toward you, with streaks and bubbles on it. She was obviously running fast before a gay wind, listing over a little on her port side. By the way, if you are going to read this story at all, and if you don't already know, you had better get it in your head that the left of a ship when you are looking ahead is port, and the right is starboard. Got that, everybody? Left, port, right, starboard. I don't know, this might be reversed on the video, so I'll trust you folks to puzzle it out for yourselves. All the sunlight fell on her from that side, and the water on that side was full of greens and purples. On the other, it was darker blue from the shadow of the ship. "The question is," said Edmund, "whether it doesn't make things worse, looking at a Narnian ship when you can't even get there." "Even looking is better than nothing," said Lucy, "and she is such a very Narnian ship." "Still playing your old game?" said Eustace Clarence, who had been listening outside the door and now came grinning into the room. Last year, when he had been staying with the Pevensies, he had managed to hear them all talking of Narnia, and he loved teasing them about it. He thought, of course, that they were making it all up, and as he was far too stupid to make anything up himself, he did not approve of that. "You're not wanted here," said Edmund, curtly. Edmund, that's so mean. In his own home. And especially a young little boy that has no friends. Poor fellow. "I'm trying to think of a limerick," said Eustace. "Something like this. Some kids who played games about Narnia got gradually balmier and balmier." "Well, Narnia and balmier don't rhyme to begin with," said Lucy. "It's an assonance," said Eustace. "Don't ask him what an assy thingamy is," said Edmund. "He's only longing to be asked. Say nothing, and perhaps he'll go away." Most boys, on meeting a reception like this, would either have cleared out or flared up. Eustace did neither. He just hung about grinning, and presently began talking again. "Do you like that picture?" he asked. "For heaven's sake, don't let him get started about art and all that," said Edmund hurriedly. But Lucy, who was very truthful, had already said, "Yes, I do. I like it very much." "It's a rotten picture," said Eustace. "You won't see it if you step outside," said Edmund. "Oh, children." Edmund is always the worst. Yeah, he's being real mean to this little kid, even if he is, so far, rather insufferable. "Why do you like it?" said Eustace to Lucy. "Well, for one thing," said Lucy, "I like it because the ship looks as if it was really moving, and the water looks as if it was really wet, and the waves look as if they were really going up and down." Of course, Eustace knew lots of answers to this, but he didn't say anything. The reason was that at that very moment he looked at the waves, and saw that they did look very much indeed as if they were going up and down. And he had only once been in a ship, and then only as far as the Isle of Wight, and had been horribly seasick. The look of the waves in the picture made him feel sick again. He turned rather green, and tried another look. And then all three children were staring with open mouths. What they were seeing may be hard to believe when you read it in print, but it was almost as hard to believe when you saw it happening. The things in the picture were moving. It didn't look at all like a cinema either. The colors were too real and clean and out of doors for that. Down went the prow of the ship into the wave, and up went a great shock of spray. And then up went the wave behind her, and the stern and her deck became visible for the first time, and then disappeared as the next wave came to meet her, and her bows went up again. At the same moment, an exercise book, which had been lying beside Edmund on the bed, flapped, rose, and sailed through the air to the wall behind him, and Lucy felt all her hair whipping round her face as it does on a windy day. And this was a windy day, but the wind was blowing out of the picture toward them. And suddenly, with the wind came the noises, the swishing of waves, and the slap of water against the ship's sides, and the creaking and the all-over high, steady roar of air and water. But it was the smell, the wild, briny smell, pickle juice, which really convinced Lucy that she was not dreaming. "Stop it!" came Eustace's voice, squeaky with fright and bad temper. "It's some silly trick you two are playing. Stop it! I'll tell Alberta. Ow!" The other two, were much more accustomed to adventures, but just exactly as Eustace Clarence said, "Ow!" they both said, "Ow!" too. The reason was that a great cold salt splash had broken right out of the frame, and they were breathless from the smack of it, besides being wet through. "I'll smash the rotten thing!" cried Eustace, and then several things happened at the same time. Eustace rushed forward towards the picture. Edmund, who knew something about magic, sprang after him, warning him to look out and not to be a fool. Lucy grabbed at him from the other side and was dragged forward. And by this time either they had grown much smaller, or the picture had grown bigger. Eustace jumped to try to pull it off the wall, and found himself standing on the frame. In front of him was not glass, but real sea, and wind and waves rushing up to the frame as they might to a rock. He lost his head and clutched at the other two who had jumped up beside him. There was a second of struggling and shouting, and just as they thought they had got their balance, a great blue roller surged up round them, swept them off their feet, and drew them down into the sea. Eustace's despairing cry suddenly ended as the water got in his mouth. Here we can see the magic of Narnia already beginning to take hold, and the three children being pulled back into the world of magic and dragons and, well, I guess there haven't been any dragons yet, but who knows, maybe we'll get lucky this time. Certainly centaurs, naiads, dryads, merfolk, dwarves, hags, werewolves, etc. A place of wonders. First kidnapped by a boat, now kidnapped by first kidnapped by a horse, now kidnapped by a boat, Mulric. Yeah, you said it. There's a lot of fortuitous child abductions going on in the world of Narnia. Ah, a little bit of agua to wash down the chocolate milk. Lucy thanked her stars that she had worked hard at her swimming lessons last term. It is true that she would have gotten on much better if she had used a slower stroke, and also that the water felt a great deal colder than it had looked while it was only a picture. Still, she kept her head and kicked her shoes off, as everyone ought to do who falls into deep water in their clothes. She even kept her mouth shut and her eyes open. They were still quite near the ship. She saw its green side towering high above them, and people looking at her from the deck. Then, as one might have expected, Eustace clutched at her in a panic, and down they both went. When they came up again, she saw a white figure diving off the ship's side. Edmund was close beside her now, treading water, and had caught the arms of the howling Eustace. Then someone else, whose face was vaguely familiar, slipped an arm under her from the other side. There was a lot of shouting going on from the ship, heads crowding together above the bulwarks, ropes being thrown. Edmund and the stranger were fastening ropes around her. After that followed what seemed a very long delay, during which her face got blue and her teeth began chattering. In reality, the delay was not very long. They were waiting till the moment when she could get on board the ship without being dashed against its side. Even with all their best endeavors, she had a bruised knee when she finally stood up, dripping and shivering on the deck. After her, Edmund was heaved up, and then the miserable Eustace. Last of all came the stranger, a golden-headed boy, some years older than herself. Any guesses? It's Dennis the Menace. Caspian, gasped Lucy, as soon as she had enough breath. For Caspian it was. Caspian, yeah, you got it, Mulric. I know there's a delay, and I moved on ahead, but you nailed it. 10 points, Mulric door. Caspian, the boy king of Narnia, whom they had helped to set on the throne during their last visit. Edmund immediately recognized him too. All three shook hands and clapped one another on the back with great delight. "But who is your friend?" said Caspian almost at once, turning to Eustace with his cheerful smile. But Eustace was crying much harder than any boy of his age has a right to cry when nothing worse than a wetting has happened to him, and would only yell out, "Let me go! Let me go back! I don't like it!" "Let you go?" said Caspian. "But where?" Eustace rushed to the ship's side, as if he expected to see the picture frame hanging above the sea, and perhaps a glimpse of Lucy's bedroom. What he saw was blue waves flecked with foam, and paler blue sky, both spreading without a peak to the horizon. Perhaps we can hardly blame him if his heart sank. He was promptly sick. "Hey, Rhine Elf," said Caspian to one of the sailors, "bring spiced wine for their majesties. You'll need something to warm you after that dip." He called Edmund and Lucy their majesties, because they, and Peter, and Susan had all been kings and queens of Narnia long before his time. Narnian time flows differently from ours. If you spent 100 years in Narnia, you would still come back to our world at the very same hour of the very same day on which you left. And then, if you went back to Narnia after spending a week here, you might find that 1,000 Narnian years had passed, or only a day, or no time at all. You never know till you get there. Consequently, when the Pevensey children had returned to Narnia last time for their second visit, it was, for the Narnians, as if King Arthur came back to Britain, and some people say he will. And I say the sooner the better. Oh, Clive Staples, admitting some desire for reform in England, circa 1950... I'm afraid I don't know enough about recent English history, or ancient English history for that matter, to comment. But nevertheless, Clive Staples, and I say the sooner the better. Bring on King Arthur. Rhine-Elf returned with the spiced wine steaming in a flagon and 4 silver cups. It was just what one wanted, and as Lucy and Edmund sipped it, they could feel the warmth going right down to their toes. But Eustace made faces and spluttered and spat it out and was sick again, and began to cry again, and asked if they hadn't any Plumptree's vitaminized nerve food, and could it be made with distilled water, and anyway he insisted on being put ashore at the next station. "This is a merry shipmate you've brought us, brother," whispered Caspian to Edmund with a chuckle. But before he could say anything more, Eustace burst out again. "Oh, ugh! What on earth's that? Take it away, the horrid thing!" He really had some excuse this time for feeling a little surprised. Something very curious indeed came out of the cabin in the poop. And was slowly approaching them. You might call it, and it indeed was, a mouse. But then it was a mouse on its hind legs and stood about 2 feet high. A thin band of gold passed round its head under one ear and over the other, and in this was stuck a long crimson feather. As the mouse's fur was very dark, almost black, the effect was bold and striking. Its left paw rested on the hilt of a sword very nearly as long as its tail. Its balance, as it paced gravely along the swaying deck, was perfect, and its manners courtly. Lucy and Edmund recognized it at once. Reepicheep, the most valiant of all the talking beasts of Narnia, and the chief mouse. It had won undying glory in the second battle of Beruna. Lucy longed, as she always had done, to take Reepicheep up in her arms and cuddle him. But this, as she well knew, was a pleasure she could never have. It would have offended him deeply. Instead, she went down on one knee to talk to him. "Here's our boy, Reepicheep, shown up in fine form with a whole tail." You'll recall that he lost his tail at the Battle of Beruna, but Aslan, based on the gallantry of all the other little mice and their willingness to cut their own off in solidarity, decided to grow it back for him and save him the indignities of being a tailless mouse. Let me see if I can get this one at least to sharpen up. Well, there he is nonetheless. That would have been right when Churchill came into office as well for the second time. Interesting. Reepicheep put forward his left leg, drew back his right, bowed, kissed her hand, straightened himself, twirled his whiskers, and said in his shrill, piping voice, "My humble duty to your majesty, and to King Edmund, too." Here he bowed again. "Nothing except your majesty's presence was lacking to this glorious venture." "Ugh, take it away," wailed Eustace. "I hate mice. And I never could bear performing animals. They're silly and vulgar and sentimental." "Am I to understand," said Reepicheep to Lucy after a long stare at Eustace, "that this singularly discourteous person is under your majesty's protection? Because, if not—" At this moment, Lucy and Edmund both sneezed. "What a fool I am to keep you all standing here in your wet things," said Caspian. "Come on below and get changed. I'll give you my cabin, of course, Lucy, but I'm afraid we have no women's clothes on board. You'll have to make do with some of mine. Lead the way, Reepicheep, like a good fellow." That's some marvelous de-escalation there, Caspian. Nice work. "To the convenience of a lady," said Reepicheep, "even a question of honor must give way, at least for the moment." And here he looked very hard at Eustace. But Caspian hustled them on, and in a few minutes Lucy found herself passing through the door into the stern cabin. She fell in love with it at once. The 3 square windows that looked out onto the blue, swirling water astern, the low cushioned benches round 3 sides of the table, the swinging silver lamp overhead, Dwarf's work she knew at once by its exquisite delicacy, and the flat gold image of Aslan the lion on the forward wall above the door. All this she took in a flash, for Caspian immediately opened a door on the starboard side and said, "This'll be your room, Lucy. I'll just get some dry things for myself." He was rummaging in one of the lockers while he spoke, "and then leave you to change. If you'll fling your wet things outside the door, I'll take them to the galley to be dried." Lucy found herself as much at home as if she had been in Caspian's cabin for weeks. And the motion of the ship did not worry her, for in the old days, when she had been a queen in Narnia, she had done a good deal of voyaging. The cabin was very tiny, but bright with painted panels, all birds and beasts and crimson dragons and vines, and spotlessly clean. Caspian's clothes were too big for her, but she could manage. His shoes, sandals, and sea boots were hopelessly big, but she did not mind going barefoot on board ship. When she had finished dressing, she looked out of her window at the water rushing past and took a long, deep breath. She felt quite sure they were in for a lovely time. And here we can see Lucy putting on the good King Caspian's garments so as to shield herself from the weathers and the imperious stares of ne'er-do-wells and onlookers. And that, my friends, is the end of our story for tonight. Well, it seems as though we will be spending at least some, if not all of our time on the high seas. That's very exciting. As I said, I haven't spent much time on boats myself, but they do certainly occupy a romantic part of the mind. There's something about voyaging and exploring and going on a grand journey to who knows where that just tickles the imagination. Boat story. Yeah, you said it. Also, Sam has said, maybe Eustace is Clive trying to make us like Edmund by comparison. Yeah, Edmund, I don't know what it is, because every time he gets back to Narnia, he seems to get a little bit more level-headed, even if he is still kind of peevish. But we've definitely got a candidate for worst boy in Eustace, who sort of seems like a bit of a stuck-up know-it-all, a little too highfalutin. Needs some of that good old-fashioned street learning. Spend more time with the other children and less time in all of those books and ridiculous stories about grain elevators. Colleen Frank says, "This story is so different once again. Hooray." Yeah, I guess each of the stories have been quite distinct, despite all taking place in the land of Narnia. We've been to the desert, we've been to the wood between the worlds, we've spent some time in a wintry forest. We were hanging out in the woods again during the summertime in Caspian. We even made it through the mountains in The Boy and His Horse as well. All about character development, says McKinnon99. Hey sis, how are you? Good to have you. Mulrick also says, "It sounds like he's trying to spout what he's heard from the adults around him." Yeah, Eustace would like very much to be taken very seriously, but he doesn't seem to be very much fun, which would probably account for his horrendous lack of friends. Although I gotta say, not having friends will go a long way to reinforce the desire to be taken very seriously by grown-ups. You know, sometimes it can feel like you would just want to fast-track the whole childhood experience, but doesn't always work out that way. So here's hoping that Eustace gets some life lessons from this budding journey on the high seas. Eustace could use one of them over-the-knee spankings. Yeah, I'm sure Clive Staples Lewis, being born all the way back in 1898, received his fair share of those as well, and attributed his upbringing to a nice, stern, upbringing. Sis, you're doing great. Happy to have this window into life. Yeah, we're all here. We're all still alive, doing the thing. It's still so bright in here. That's wild. I guess the sun won't be setting properly for quite some time. But Nevertheless, I invite you all to spend the rest of the evening winding down, taking care of yourselves, and getting ready for a good night's sleep so that tomorrow can be joyous and active and all those wonderful things. Almost solstice. Yeah, you said it, Sam. The 21st or so, I think, of June. We're about 2 weeks out. Oh, goodness, how time flies. I can't believe June's already a week gone. Anyways, thank you for tuning in tonight, everybody. Oh, Heather, you say, how many books are there? There are 7 books all told. Are we going to have a debate into reading order ever? That's definitely something we can talk about. It's something that a few people have mentioned in the past. I know that there's a lot of proponents of reading the books in the order in which they were written, rather than the order in which they are sort of, given 1 through 7 in the series, which correlates to the Narnian timeline. Oh, and it's Charlie's birthday. Congratulations to the little pup. 4. Wow, he's not such a puppy anymore. Wow, that's awesome. Have you really had Charlie for that long? That's remarkable. What a good boy. Well, once again, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I hope the rest of your night is restful and enjoyable, and you get a good night's sleep and all that jazz. So, this is Brother Bedtime saying to you, good night, moon, and good night, stars. Good night, trucks, and good night, cars. Good night, shoes, and good night, hats. Good night, dogs, and good night, cats. Good night to friends and family. Good night to you, and good night to me. Sweet dreams, everybody. Have a great night's sleep.